The world champion Magnus Carlsen takes on his arch rival Anish Giri. The game begins. Magnus opens with e4. Anish goes solid with e5. And we have the Rui Lopez on the board. Anish says, let's go for a Berlin. Magnus adjusts his knight and plays the anti-Berlin here. Bishop to c5 takes, d takes c6. And this is all well-known theory. Magnus thinks for a bit here. Of course, you can't take on e5 because queen d4 would lose. So castles bishop to g4. And now bishop g5. This is not the most common move in the position. That's the reason why you saw Anish looking at the side, trying to recollect his variations. h6, bishop h4, and queen is moved to e7, defending the e5 pawn for the time being. The knight bd2. Anish long castles. Wow, what a move. Now with opposite side castling, we have g5, h5, h4 on the cards, while Magnus is kind of stuck. What does he do? He wants to play c3, d4 or c3, b4, but then the d3 pawn becomes weak after c3. So actually, he is here in some difficulty to come up with an idea. And that's the reason why you can see the world champion taking his time. He goes bishop g3 to attack the e5 pawn. And what his idea is that once knight d7 or bishop d6 is played to protect the e5 pawn, then the d file is blocked and he can then push his pawn to c3 and start expanding on the queen side. So very sly move by the world champion. Anish also taking his time. Both players roughly have around 2.5 minutes on the clock. Anish thinking whether he should go for bishop d6 or knight d7. And knight to d7 has been played, defending the e5 pawn. Now what does Magnus do? Well, his plan was to go c3 and start the queenside expansion. He does that. He plays c3 and Anish first keeps his king safe to on b8. Anish knows that he can begin his attack very soon, but first should secure his own king. Bishop back, and Magnus has begun pushing the pawns. Anish should do something soon because b5 is coming in the position, and Anish of course goes g5. The battle has begun. b5 to open up more lines, but Anish says no, I'll keep it closed. a5 and h5. Look at that. h4 will trap the bishop. So h4 by Magnus. He could have also gone h3, but he decides to go h4. Now for Anish, it's a question whether he should take on h4, whether he should keep the tension. Also, he must keep in mind about breaks like a6 and b6 in the position. How is he going to respond to that? So Magnus now ahead on time, takes a sip of water there. He has 2 minutes 8 seconds. Anish has 1 minute 35 seconds on the clock. And Anish Giri has an important decision to make. He takes on h4, bishop h4 and f6. So now he's got an open g file. Magnus brings his queen to b3, breaks the pin in this position. Anish is going to meet b6 with taking and a6 to keep things close there. So he knows everything is okay on that side. But how to create play on the king side now? From where does he? Because Magnus has got his pieces nicely placed on the king side. So first, get the rook on an open file. That's a very good idea. But the time situation is not in Anish's favor, although the position looks quite promising. Magnus has to now decide what is the next thing to do. A very logical idea can be rook f b1. Maybe then he can get his king out also from that side of the board. But bishop g3, that's not a good move by Magnus. He's moved his bishop there. Well, maybe what he wants to do is get his knight to h4. Anish, very nice move. Gets his bishop to e6, attacking the queen. Queen to a4. And now you can double down the g file. That is a possibility. You can also sacrifice a pawn somehow with c4. But first, Anish goes rook to g4. He wants to double there. Magnus should think about now breaking here with b6, because clearly in terms of attack it seems like black's attack is breaking through. He already has an open file, h4 is on the cards. So for Magnus, it's a question between whether should he go for an attack, should he secure his own king. But securing his own king would mean that making defensive moves, and in such positions making defensive moves would mean that sooner or later your opponent will find a way. Well, Magnus goes on the defense. That is good news for Anish Giri, because now knight h2, the rook is attacked. Anish has to move his rook, but where? Takes his time, but time is very precious here. He has only 35 seconds on the clock. Rook g7, excellent move by Anish, so that he can double the rooks down the g file, and he brings his other rook into the game. Knight h4. So Magnus has kind of secured the king side. c4. Oh, and there Anish bangs the clock, apologizes to his opponent, but what a beautiful move he has played. He has freed up the c5 square for his knight. Positionally beautiful pawn sacrifice by Anish Giri. Knight has come to c5. White is a pawn up, but look at black pieces. They are so pretty. Queen to f7. Now the c4 pawn is under pressure. Also now no knight f5 tricks in the air because the queen has moved away. Magnus, desperate, tries to open up the position. Anish keeps it closed. Rook to d1, attacking the bishop, and the bishop comes back. In such positions now with c4 pawn falling, Magnus decides to give up an exchange there. Wow, what an exchange sacrifice by the world champion. Anish picks it up, takes cd5, and now what next? He has just 12 seconds. He goes bishop d8, attacking the b6 pawn. The knight enters, rook to g6. Anish's position is beautiful, but his time is very low. Queen d7 is a nice move, so that later on after knight h4, rook moves, there won't be a triple fork in the position with the queen being on f7. So he's moved his queen away. Magnus now down to 40 seconds. Although Anish is an exchange up, white pieces are currently pretty well placed. Magnus is thinking, can he take advantage of this diagonal somehow? He goes knight to h4, and Anish with a little bit confused where to move his rook, but 9 seconds on the clock. Rook g4, and there's a fork, but Anish has seen it. Knight takes e4, he takes the rook, takes the bishop, h4 is hanging, fg3, and now a check, intermediate check, and takes the knight on g8. After the smoke has cleared, you can see that black is totally winning. Even Magnus knows that, and Anish now starts moving so quickly. He has 15 seconds. Position is utterly lost here for Magnus Carlsen. Anish knows he's got the win in the bag, has to be calm, should keep his nerves. Rook to b3 to defend the pawn on g3. And now he wants to push his e-pawn. 9 seconds, 8, 7, Anish needs to move. 6, he plays e4 calmly. Queen b2, and look at this move, bishop d6, attacking g3, giving up the b7 pawn. Magnus, you can take that pawn with a check, but once the king moves to a8, there is no stopping bishop g3 or even queen h4 because the pawn is pinned here this way. Magnus takes on b7, king a8 instantly played, and there is no move there. Magnus down to 3 seconds, he comes back, and Anish there, so excited with the win, takes on g3. Magnus resigns. Anish Giri has won it. What an intense blitz game that was. Simply epic. Players put back their pieces, and Anish winks at the camera.